So this now brings us to the end of our presentations for this webinar. And we are now going to move on to our Q&A session. So I just need to ask Nick and Tom if they can bring up their faces. There we go. And unmute themselves. And so we are now going to have, let's go ahead both a Q&A session and a chat session. So people are really challenging me with my technological prowess or lack thereof. So as I see here, we have Q&A. There's 6 questions, I guess, under the Q&A and 9 under the chat. So let's go ahead and start with the Q&A. Let's see if I can't move these over a little bit. And we'll just start at the top. The first one says, how does inclusion on the local list help preserve these sites? Is there any way to prevent, for example, unsympathetic alterations to non-nationally listed structures? So, Nick, do you want to have a go with that one?
Yeah, I mean, this is quite a hot debate really in local listing. With the Somerset and Exmoor local list, our main aim is to flag up the heritage interest so that when development proposals come forward for a site, a building, a monument, that everyone knows what the heritage interest encapsulated in that asset is, and then hopefully the right decisions will be made. The actual, the controls, statutory controls on demolition or unauthorized alterations, that is reserved for heritage assets of national importance. So that is with listing and scheduling, listed buildings and scheduling. So this does have local listing does have a real role to play in when sites are affected by planning applications, so that everyone knows the information is available. But it also has a role to play with other sort of development control decisions, maybe through the management that a property owner may take. He'll be aware of the heritage interest in his management plans. And the other aim is to encourage people to recognise the special qualities of the property they own, and that people will sort of see it that way and then think, well, I didn't realise this was so special, and people cherished it so much, and encourage them to sort of hopefully maintain it for everyone's enjoyment. So there are no additional controls for local listing in Somerset and Exmoor. That is reserved for national controls, national scheduling and listed building controls.
All right, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Right, so next question. Do we assume all the photo examples that you have given are already nominated on the list? Is that one you could answer, Tom, since you're the one who's mostly handling everything that's coming in?
I can do, Mary. Hi there, everyone. It's a very good question. They will all be put forward for nomination. I think a good number of the examples shown tonight are already in our system, but I know from following through with particularly Nick's presentation, there are a few there that we will need to add. But as you saw, some of them are part of collections, things like signs and street furniture and things. So maybe there are other examples we haven't got. So yeah, do check, and obviously we can always supplement existing nominations with more information. So don't let that be a barrier, but we are hopefully going to hoover up all of those things that have been shown to you tonight.
Right, yeah, that's great. Yes. Oh yeah,
sorry.
Yeah,
can I just say, if there's any that I showed that you know locally, then please do put them in. We'd rather have the public nominate them than say maybe ourselves, and you may know far more about them. And certainly quite a few examples I showed haven't quite got into the system yet. So, there's no problem with duplicating anything, or you would probably beat us to it on some of those examples.
All right, that's great. All right, thanks, Nick. Right, so next,
Mary, I was just going to add to that.
Yes.
I also do the project social media, and I share a lot of examples on there. Most of them could well be on the list, but they are not yet listed, not added yet. So if you see those, please do have a go, check whether they're on there. They probably aren't, and list away.
All right, that's great. Thank you. Right, so next question. Do buildings get a plaque to describe why it is of interest? Well, I'll have a first stab at that, and then I may have to hand it over to Nick. That is a question that has been raised to us about a month or so ago. And the answer is it's a good idea, but it's something that we need to investigate. It's not something that is automatically going to happen. Nick, have you had any more thoughts on that since it was first, that question was first asked of us about a month ago?
Yeah, I think this is potentially an interesting spin-off project, especially with those where there's a historical association. So there was a site in Wellington that cropped up, which would make an excellent example. And I think we could do something that runs alongside local listing to highlight if a building is where someone was born, or there was a historical event, then it could be yeah, quite an exciting project to start up. So we sort of started thinking about it, but it hasn't got any further, but we do like that idea.
All right, that's great. All right, thank you. So the next question, are the nomination forms all PDF or can they be issued in Word? All right, Hattie, I'm going to throw that one to you.
Yes, the nomination form is actually a Word document that you download from the website. The spreadsheet is obviously Excel, so you don't have to deal with PDF. If you prefer a PDF, let me know and I'll give you one. Yeah.
All right, great. How would an entry be corrected if you think you can show that someone has put inaccurate information on it? Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know, is that a Hattie or Tom question?
I think that's a Tom question.
Okay.
Gosh, that's a good question, quite a tricky one. No, I mean, essentially, we're hoping to sort of take in the research submitted to us, but also try and do a bit of verification and checking. And if we can't establish sort of facts, we are, in the HCR, we are able to present multiple interpretations. So if you do feel that you've got a slightly different view or things aren't quite right, you can submit and we can present, multiple options, as it were. But we are hoping over time to collate some research to find out sort of what the potential definitive answer is. So I think a bit like with Nick's photos, I think if you think you know something and you think it's worth adding, do send it in and we can include it. And obviously, when we go through the assessment stage later on in the process, it may be that we come to some sort of determination of what we want to go with. But yeah, please do submit. And if you see something that you think's wrong or you've got a different idea, that's no barrier to submitting. So do that and we can present both or multiple options.
Great, thanks, Tom. Right, the next question, is there a source of more detailed information about the list? And the answer to that in one word is yes. The four of us have been, along with a bunch of other people, had been working the last, quite a few, probably 6 months now, on pulling together a very comprehensive, what we're calling a technical guide, which goes in, and there we go. And Nick's holding one up for you. It is now, it's still in its draft form. It will have to go through consultation and sort of ratification, but we have actually put it up onto our website. So if you want to get more detailed information about the whole process from beginning to end of the nomination process, go on to the Southwest Heritage Trust website, to the local heritage list webpage, and there you will where did you put it, Hattie? Did you put it under the resources page?
It's under resources, yes.
Under resources. Okay, so if you look under resources, and you will see something called the Local Heritage List Technical Guide for Somerset and Exmoor. Right, so next question. What happens after I make a nomination? All right, I guess that probably goes to Tom. You want to?
Sure. Okay, so obviously we receive the nomination through whichever of Hattie's 4 methods you want to use. I then collate the information and enter it into the HER, the Historic Environment Record, or I share it with colleagues in Exmoor if it's in their area. And we basically prepare it to upload into the HER, and it goes in as what we're calling a candidate. So that's sort of demonstrating it's ready to be considered. And then obviously further down the line, when we get to the point where the assessment panel is convened, all the candidates will be reviewed and a decision will be made. And then obviously that status could be changed to locally listed or requires more information or, not accepted at this time. But obviously being on the system doesn't preclude other research. So both in-house here at the Southwest Heritage Trust and also other sort of people involved in the project can obviously keep submitting. So that's the sort of general process.
All right, great. Thanks, Tom. So the next question, who assesses the nominations? Do you do any extra research or rely entirely on the information submitted? Actually, I think that's another Tom question, because you've actually started sort of answered part of that question already.
Yeah, I'll say a little bit and then I'll pass to Nick on the assessment panel because I think that's more his area. So we are hoping that we can do a bit of research ourselves or supplement entries, because obviously, as Hattie has said, you can nominate no matter how much you know. So even if you don't have very much, we can hopefully supplement that. So I think there would be additional information to be added to it, possibly, particularly if we felt it was necessary. And obviously, a lot of nominations are coming in with sources where that information has come from. So we'll be able to check that and see what the sort of origins and background are. But then in terms of the assessment panel, I'll pass to Nick, but they have a certain role too.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So there's two assessment panels. There's one covering Somerset, and then there's one covering Exmoor. So the panel in Somerset will be made up of at least 3 individuals. There'll be staff from the Historic Environment Service at the South West Heritage Trust, and also it'll be supplemented by people with appropriate interests in the partner bodies who are part of the wider project. So it could be from the Somerset Industrial Archaeological Society, or it could be from SARNS, it could be from the Quantock AOMV. It depends on the nominations. We probably bunch them into sort of sittings depending on their type. And we may also ask someone with a specialist interest to come and give us some advice. They might be sort of a non-voting member of that panel. So that's what would happen in Somerset. In Exmoor, they have a similar makeup. They will have members of staff from their planning and heritage teams. They will also have someone from their panel, the Exmoor panel, and an Exmoor member. So it's quite similar. And then when the assessment panels have made their decision, they will go forward for ratification by the planning authority. So in Somerset, it would go to the different local planning authorities for ratification, and then once ratified, that would come back to us, and then Tom would update the HER. And once that update has been made, that is the date of local listing, and that will show on the HER.
All right, that's great. Thanks, Nick. Now, our next question is, if a local list item is lost through neglect, demolition, local planners and developers, will there still be a record kept of what has been lost? Also, what happens if they become unnoteworthy? I think, Tom, that was something that we had talked about earlier, didn't we?
It is, yeah. So the Historic Environment Record has the capacity to record all assets and indeed the site of assets. So anything nominated for the local list will have a record. So even if it's demolished, it will be changed to sort of site of, Bowring's Mill or whatever it may be. Obviously, I hope not, but we do retain information. So anything you submit is never lost or discarded. It would perhaps be updated with information about the event of loss. But we do already have records for sites of assets that have gone or been lost. So you would still be able to sort of have a sort of memory of that place, and any sort of images or things submitted would still be there. So yeah, the record will persist even if the asset perhaps didn't.
Right.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think of one of the things I like most about the HER and the LHL Local Heritage List 2 is that it is a record of memory, and that things that have long been lost, are actually still there to be seen and known. So that's one of the reasons I think it's worth adding things to these lists.
Right. I also want to add in that sometimes, for example, something will be nominated, but it gets rejected for whatever reason. It's that it doesn't go on to the local list. However, people who then, say, for example, 5 or 6 years down the line, another member of the public wants to come in and nominate that same thing, they can go online and see, oh, somebody has already nominated that and it hasn't gotten through for whatever reason. So it then prevents people from kind of wasting their time, multiple times, trying to nominate things that for whatever reason would not make the list. So that's why it's very important, to check the HER before you start going too far into the listing process. Right.
Sorry, Mary, it
yeah.
is, yeah, it is also worth, if you look and you think, and you see that is the scenario, then you think the information was a bit thin and you have additional information, then
Right.
send
Well,
a
that's true.
nomination in.
Well, that's true. Yes. If you feel like, oh, well, it doesn't get submitted because they didn't know X, Y, or Z, which probably will then knock it up. Yeah. And absolutely. So, yeah, so it's definitely worth looking on the HER and seeing, you know, what's already there before you start in. Right. So is there a limit you have on listing street furniture? I think the answer to that is, I don't think so. I don't know, Nick.
No, I mean, there's a lot of drain covers with a lot, but you know, we wouldn't put every drain cover. We'd just put the ones with the foundry names of local foundries. But the HER, we've got some pretty small dots, haven't we, Tom? So we can get a lot in there. And actually, when you start to look, it's not so many, because it will only be those that are specific to Somerset or how particularly old. So they have heritage interest in their own right. So no, we'll be interested to receive all nominations on street furniture, and some of that street furniture could be quite, you know, if it's artistic, it could be reasonably modern, so it could be celebrating, and there's some art in chart, for instance, which is quite interesting. So yeah, please do send them in.
All right, that's lovely, thank you. Right, can a submitted record be edited or updated? Well, I think we have addressed that already, haven't we? And the answer to that is yes. You just go ahead and, I guess, send it in through Know Your Place, or I guess through one of Hattie's means, and it will come through to Tom, and then he will deal with it accordingly. Is that correct, Tom?
That's absolutely right, Mary. Yes, just send it in, and we can always add to or amend existing records. So, in fact, with the HER, that's what we do all the time. When people find out new information about any sites, we update the record saying what they've found and where the source of information was. So, yes, please do keep sending in, and we'll just keep building and building and building. And obviously, as Nick says, the more we know, the better the panel will be informed to make their decisions.
All right, great, thanks.
Mary, can I just jump back to the previous question, just to say on the street furniture? I mean, there are some places like Minehead and Frome which have really extensive collections of cast iron lamp columns, and you might think, oh well, there's 24 of these, but we want to know about them all, because as there is a category in our assessment panel in our assessment criteria for collections. So it may be that their actual cumulative sort of value is important. So please don't hold back if you think just because there's a lot of an example, we won't want to hear about it.
All right, that's great. Yeah, thanks, Nick. Right. So the next question is, will you capture the extent of community support for the importance of different sites? That's a very good question. And that's not something actually that we've discussed. I'm not quite sure how the kind of the metrics we would use for measuring that. Any of you guys?
Yeah. I mean, I would say social value comes under the selection themes. So, you know, some of these places, I sort of think at St Matthew's Field in Bridgewater, where there's been a fair since the 15th century, you know, that kind of could attract quite a lot of nominations, and some of those sites will depend on having that community recognition. And so I think depending on the type of heritage asset, having a high community support will be important to having them nominated. So what we're not going to we don't have a means to record every time something is nominated, because like we've said, once it's been nominated, you sort of don't need to repeat it, but you may want to collect local community support and make that part of your submission.
All right, thank you. Right, so the next question, can the nomination spreadsheet and other forms be processed by non-Microsoft software? For example, OpenOffice or LibreOffice or software, a Linux or Unix machine. Oh, okay, that's over my pay grade. I need to come down to somebody else.
Actually, I'll say that's actually a really good question. And my initial thought is yes, because I have tried to run Excel documents on OpenOffice before, and it went fine. But I will check that actually. And if it doesn't, I'll get it working. So yes, and certainly yes in a few days. But no, that should be fine. Yeah.
All right, that's good. I'm glad you understood the question. All right. Now, could Hattie please repeat the name of the archaeological group she mentioned earlier?
I think that was SARNS, so that's Somerset Archaeological and Natural History Society. That's definitely worth checking out. I'll get in trouble if I spend lots of time plugging it now, but yeah, it's a great group. Go for it.
All right, that's wonderful. Now, if a site is turned down, will the nominee be notified? Is there an appeal process? Nick, do you want to answer this one?
I think on being notified, if we have the details, I think we'll make every effort to let you know that it's been turned down and why. In terms of an appeal process, there is the technical guide does mention about an appeal, and the intention is that the appeal would be a joint sitting between the Somerset and the Exmoor panels. So there is a sort of a broader consensus to look at any appeals that are made.
All right, that's great. Thank you. Right. Is recording heritage items in the historic county of Somerset outside of the modern county, e.g. Somerset finger posts?
Yes, it has to be in the modern administrative county. However, both North Somerset and Bath and North East Somerset have their own local listing schemes that are up and running. So if you look at their websites, you will find a means to put those features forward for local listing in those authorities.
All right, that's great. Thank you. Does the owner or landowner have to agree to a nomination? Well, Nick, you want to carry on with that one?
No, they don't. We'll make an effort to notify an owner if there's an address that we can send them a letter to, but otherwise we won't. There's not a means to, and it's not crucial for a nomination to go forward.
All right, that sounds great. So I think that that's it in terms of questions. So if any of you have any local heritage list topics which you feel you'd like to have covered in future webinars, please do feel free to contact us via our email address, which you will find on the Southwest Heritage website. And that just leaves me now to thank all of our speakers. So thank you to Tom Sunley and Nick Wall and Hattie Induni. And of course, our webinar tech support, Simon Hill, who none of you have seen, but he's been working his little magic in the background for us. So thank you for taking the time to join us. And we hope this webinar has really helped spark some excitement about all the possibilities available to you to get actively involved in helping preserve your own local heritage. And we really look forward to seeing what nominations each of you will submit for our new Somerset and Exmoor local heritage list. So thank you and have a lovely evening.